What happened to your man in the room out there, Bouchard?
To Arno? You've got something to say about that?
Maybe. It might be linked to what happened to a friend of mine.
I doubt it. Get her out of here.
Do you know the name Eckhart?
Never heard of him.
Okay. You helped a friend of mine a while back. Werner von Croy.
Names don't mean a lot here. Even real ones. What did he want?
Maps and information on the Louvre.
I remember, 4 weeks ago. Wanted to take a coachload of Japanese tourists to see the Mona Lisa.
Easy, Bouchard. I lost that friend yesterday. Now I'm wanted for his murder.
There was a newscast about a monstrum killing earlier. What would you know about that?
Nothing that would interest you.
You'd be surprised how much the monstrum interests me.
Hello. This is Brock from Brock and Sindri, and this is the third in a series about forgotten games of the 2000s. It's no secret I'm a big fan of the original Tomb Raider series, core design and Eidos Interactive back in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, but there was also a few more that sort of went under the radar or forgotten or just widely lambasted later on, and I think some of that was a little bit harsh. Now obviously 1, 2 and 3 were fantastic. The last Revelation, which was like kind of 4, was pretty good, and then you had Chronicles. These were really good, and then you had The Angel of Darkness, which was the 6th and last by these two. It was the first one to really try and adopt a totally different format. So you had The Last Revelation, which really was set in one place, more or less, right? It was set in Egypt. And you had Chronicles, which sort of went back to what was before, and then you had this one, which was different, and it wasn't received very well. However, I enjoyed it for what it was, a different type of game, and I have to say, looking back, I think it's a lot better than what it got credit for. And I wanted to highlight it and talk about it and get you guys' thoughts. As I said, it was the last one developed by Core Design and published by Eidos Interactive together. It was actually released in June 2003 for Windows, PS2, and a December 2003 Mac OS X port. It was the first Tomb Raider title to be released for the PS2. Storyline followed Lara Croft as she attempted to clear herself of being the suspect of the murder of her former mentor Werner von Croy, whilst investigating the activities of a type of black magic / satanic cult. The game's development began 3 years before release, and the intention was to create a different type of game from the previous entries in the franchise, and one that could potentially compete better with newer action games and fully exploit the potential of the 6th generation of gaming platforms. It was also planned to be the first in a new trilogy of Tomb Raider games released for the new generation. However, because development was fraught with difficulties, led to the game being delayed a couple of times, and then numerous planned sections of the games had to be scaled back in order to meet the deadlines. It did sell 2.5 million copies worldwide, but it received generally negative reviews. While some praise went into the narrative, critics faulted the game for the poor controls, the camera, and numerous technical issues. In the aftermath of the game's release, the planned trilogy of the games had to be scrapped, and development of the franchise went from Core to Crystal Dynamics for the next entry, which was Tomb Raider Legend. So the gameplay, basically, it was a third-person action-adventure puzzle game, just like the last ones, and you still controlled the main series protagonist Lara Croft through most of the game. The majority of Lara's basic moves are carried over from the previous installments, like walking, jumping, climbing, swimming, crawling, swinging on ropes, etc., and standard gunplay. Her new moves included a small hop, army crawling, hand-to-hand combat, and a super jump that can be formed while running. You can also sneak up on enemies and perform stealth attacks now, flatten herself against walls, and peer around corners. Her ability to sprint, present in the 3 previous entries in the series, is only available when the player opened a cabinet containing gas masks in the galleries under siege level here. Her weapons arsenal also was modified from previous games and featured new weapons such as a K2 impactor stun gun and upgraded versions of weapons like the shotgun. However, unlike previous versions of the games, Lara now has a stamina meter which depletes while she's performing bouts of climbing, and if the bar empties before reaching her destination, she falls. The rate at which the meter decreases slows if the player performs special actions that increase Lara's strength. These actions are also necessary to progress in many of the levels. The game incorporates elements similar to a role-playing game, in this case where Lara can actually talk with various NPCs encountered throughout the environments and choose what kinds of answers to give. Early in the game, these answers encounters will directly affect progress through the story. The game also features a second playable character called Curtis Trent, who initially appears to be an antagonist, but he becomes controllable by the player late in the game, and he features mainly some identical moves to Lara, and sections of the game are more based around combat. Spoiler alert, let's go through some of the plot. The Angel of Darkness follows on from events in Tomb Raider: The Last Revelation and Tomb Raider Chronicles, where Lara Croft was presumed dead, and at an unspecified time later she arrives in Paris at the request of her former mentor Werner von Croy, who was tasked by a man named Eckhart to find a set of artifacts known as the Obscura paintings. The city and von Croy are gripped with fear over a serial killer the press have dumped the Monstrum. During an argument between Lara and von Croy, an unknown force then attacks them and Lara is knocked unconscious. She wakes to find von Croy dead and her memories of the attack blurred. Suspected of his murder, Lara goes on the run, and after retrieving von Croy's journal from a colleague named Margot Carvier, she learns that von Croy discovered the location of the fourth Obscura painting beneath the Louvre. During her time in Paris getting help from local businessmen and mob boss Louis Bouchard, Lara is stalked by Curtis Trent, the last survivor of a society called the Lux Veritatis, who are sworn to fight against Eckhart's plans. After infiltrating the Louvre, she learns that the paintings hide pieces of the Sandglyph, an alchemical artifact created by Eckhart hundreds of years before. The paintings were seized and hidden by the Lux Veritatis centuries before. After retrieving the painting from its hiding place, Lara is ambushed by Curtis and robbed of the painting. The two escape the Louvre, as it is assaulted by mercenaries, with Curtis using a magical disc to keep both Lara and the mercenaries at bay. The two are both knocked out by a shape-shifting stranger who steals the painting. Lara is rescued by Bouchard, who takes her to von Croy's apartment to find further clues. However, Bouchard sends an assassin to kill Lara. She is able to eliminate the hitman and then heads for Prague, where a new Monstrum killing has taken place. Arriving in Prague, she finds the location of the final painting and re-encounters a captive Bouchard. He reveals that Eckhart is planning to use the Sandglyph to awaken the Cubiculum Nephili, the last surviving member of the hostile Nephilim race, and breed them back into existence. Bouchard is later murdered by Eckhart, who is revealed to have been killing and extracting samples for his experiments under the guise of the Monstrum. Lara infiltrates Eckhart's fortress, the Strahov Sanitarium, and encounters members of the Cabal, a secret society that shares Eckhart's ambitions. While going through the complex, she switches off the power, releasing a rabid creature called the Proto-Nephilim. Later on, Lara is locked in a containment area by Curtis so he can turn the power back on without interference. Curtis succeeds, finding his way through the sanatorium and killing the Proto-Nephilim. Forming an alliance, Lara retrieves the final painting while Curtis goes to retrieve a Periapt shard, one of 3 magical daggers which can kill Eckhart. After retrieving the painting, Lara is forced by Eckhart to hand over the painting to save Curtis's life. And after Eckhart releases one of the Cabal's monsters on them, Curtis helps Lara escape, giving her the 2 Periapt shards in his possession before killing the Nephilim. Lara succeeds in wounding him but is stopped by Kirel, Eckhart's right-hand man. Kirel proceeds to kill Eckhart, revealing himself to be a Nephilim who has been secretly aiding Lara, using his influence in the Cabal and shape-shifting abilities. He offers Lara the chance to join him, but Lara refuses after remembering that it was Kirel who murdered von Croy in Eckhart's form. Lara uses the Sandglyph to destroy the Cubiculum Nephili, causing an explosion that kills Kirel. On her way out, she finds Curtis's weapon, and it leads her towards the monster's chamber. Smiling, Lara walks through the door into shadows, ending the game. Alright, a little bit convoluted. Talk about the story shortly. During the development, as I said, it started 3 years before release under the working title Tomb Raider Next Gen. Part of the prep for the game, the company conducted market research and decided to create a new setting and story for the main character, and one of the main drives behind the game is trying to fully use the new platform's potential and reinvent the character of Lara Croft a little bit, including rebuilding her character model and allowing her to perform melee combat. It was the first game in the series made for the PS2 platform. What we know is that core design had actually separated into 2 teams, with a new team working on Angel of Darkness series, and the regulars from the previous games were on Chronicles. So even though it was the same company, it was a totally new group of people working on the games, and it does show a little bit. Now, among the goals for the team on Angel of Darkness was to create a more complicated puzzle to make the character of Lara Croft, together with the tone of the game, a bit darker and more hard-edged. It did succeed in this, by the way. They also wished to compete with some of the newer action-adventure games on the market, which were providing heavy competition and include gameplay ideas from games like Shenmue and the Metal Gear series. Many character movements were drawn from and based directly on movements made by real people, similar to later mocap techniques, and the world design drew from various artists and elements of films from the likes of Luc Besson and David Fincher. Murty Schofield, who had previously worked with core design, was brought in to write the story and the script. Schofield also created the character Curtis Trent upon a request for someone who could become the focus of a spin-off franchise. They spent 2 years trying to reshape the franchise, as well as writing a backstory in the form of a book separated into multiple chapters, with the Angel of Darkness being the first of those chapters. Jonelle Elliott returned as the voice of Lara Croft, and this would be the last time she provided the voice, with Keely Hawes taking over in future titles. A lot of the criticism, I think, was fair. They tried something a bit different, they tried something a bit out there, and it's not always going to be perfect straight away. But some of the problems with the game were sensed already at an early stage, and Heath Smith forgot himself and began swearing at the game while trying to demonstrate the opening level at a buyer's conference, which was always a good start to showcase the game. A release date was announced for November 2002, but the game got delayed until spring 2003. Eidos believed the Angel of Darkness would benefit from additional marketing support from Lara Croft Tomb Raider: The Cradle of Life, which was the sequel to the original 2001 film. Despite the delays, the company pushed Core Design to release the game in time for the marketing support. Core Design later said they felt Eidos forced them to get the game out before it was ready. Most of the initial sales were good. There was a lot of good advertising. The movie helped give it more. It was further into the series. It was more well known by now, so it did sell well. But the feedback and the Metacritic was poor. According to Metacritic, which calculates an average score of 52 and 49 for the PS2 and the Windows versions respectively, so that is middling, real middling. Most of the reviewers did praise the storyline, the graphics, the sound, and the environment, but they criticized the bugs and the system requirements, the poor controls, the combat, the camera movement. All fair. In 2010, this is going a few years later, Game Trailers placed the game 5th in their top 10 worst sequels list. The Angel of Darkness actually caused a lot of problems for the Tomb Raider franchise, and Paramount Pictures faulted the Cradle of Life's lackluster box office performance on the poor critical reception the video game received from reviewers and fans. Bullshit, but whatever. Shortly after the game's release, Jeremy Heath Smith, who was managing director at Core Design, mentioned before, swearing at the pre-sales, and development director at Eidos Interactive, he left both companies with immediate effect, and plans for a sequel called The Lost Dominion, part of a proposed trilogy created using the game's engine, was scrapped. Following the poor performance of both the game and the second movie, Eidos then transferred the production of the next Tomb Raider game from Core Design to another Eidos subsidiary, Crystal Dynamics, who did the development for the Legacy of Kain series. Core Design would never release another Tomb Raider title, and the studio remained attached to the franchise until 2006, when a remake of the original game for the PSP entitled 10th Anniversary was cancelled, and Core Design sold to Rebellion Developments and renamed to Rebellion Derby, and the studio ultimately be shut down in 2010. In later years, the Angel of Darkness has become noted for using or experimenting with multiple gameplay features that have later become commonplace, such as the RPG elements, stamina meter, and mixing atmospheric features from different video games. In 2021, an unofficial fan remake titled The Angel of Darkness 1.5 was revealed to be in development as a revamped collab between developer Julian Guba and character model creator Konrad Majewski with the Unreal Engine 4. A devlog posted on YouTube by Guba revealed the development progress and featured gameplay, a new model for Lara Croft which took Majewski approximately 6 months to create, and plans for the future regarding the designs they will implement or revamp. Now, why do I want to talk about this? Because I was 13, 12 really when it came out, 13 when I was playing it. That's a seminal age. There's been a few games that I've been talking about from around this same time, and the previous two in this series, The Getaway and also Enter the Matrix, both came out in a very similar period of time, in the early couple of years of a new generation, PS2 in particular. Developers are going to push what they can do, and they're experimenting with what a platform can do, and usually titles don't often get refined until 3, maybe 4 years into a generation, which means that you've got half of a generation, a typical generation life cycle, gone. And this has kind of happened with, on more recent generations. You think about God of War's release in 2018, which was possibly the game of the generation, maybe not, but some people would say so. And the same year also had Red Dead Redemption 2, right? Both of which are absolutely magnificent works of art. That was 4 years after the PS4 was released. So it takes a while. I think that The Angel of Darkness was a little bit convoluted, but otherwise a decent story. And what they did with it was, you're talking to people, you're researching in different ways. It's not just trying to climb through a pyramid or whatever it may be, like climb out of a volcano or go to Atlantis or whatever it is, right? And so it was definitely different, but what it really reminds me of is precursors for games like Deus Ex Mankind Divided. Like, it had these hub locations rather than free world, open world, hub locations where you could sort of move around and go to different places and talk to different people and see different things, and then go into places that then had some of the main sort of missions, if you like. And if I'm not wrong, and I could be wrong here, in which case you're not going to hear this anyway because I'm going to edit, Eidos Interactive is Square Enix, who are famous for what? Deus Ex. It is amazing going back and seeing how much of Human Revolution and Mankind Divided, especially Mankind Divided because there was Prague, and Prague also features in the Angel of Darkness, and it's amazing to see how much of what they did in the Angel of Darkness was again ahead of its time. Now, these sort of games that I talk about in these series, they tend to be forgotten or lambasted, etc., or lambasted, however that's pronounced, and it often seems to be, well, if they just came out 5 to 10 years later, they would have been universally loved. You know, you think about The Getaway and L.A. Noire, made by the same people. You think about The Angel of Darkness, and they, you know, that by the time Deus Ex rolled around, well, it's getting the credit that it deserves. So I think The Angel of Darkness is worth another visit. And if you guys have Steam, you should. It's like $10 or something. It's really quite cheap. It's worth the expenditure and another playthrough. I think this game gets a lot of stick. I quite enjoyed it. There were, of course, frustrating things, and in particular, there was a bar called the Serpent Rouge, and I died in that one so many times. It pissed me off, and I still have PTSD to this day. However, I enjoyed the story. It had the right amount of scares and everything else. Like, yeah, it was pretty good. Never really played Tomb Raider Legend, and haven't really done much Tomb Raider since, to be honest, and that tells you a lot. And I know even with the reboot in recent years, it's supposed to be amazing, but I haven't been able to bring myself to it. So anyway, this is sort of my re-highlight of The Angel of Darkness. Hopefully there's been clips of the game and whatnot going. Hopefully, you know, maybe there is this fan remake, maybe that will help bring it back to attention. I would love it to, you know, if we could see some form of proper remake and going down that path. I think Lara is a good character and has life in her yet, and that's probably going to do it for this video. What do you guys think about that game? Did you play it? If not, do you have Steam? Do you think that you might go and have a look? Let me know. Talk to me in the comments, and we'll see you in the next Forgotten Games video.
Right, let's go adventuring.